Rolex, a name associated with success, a watch for winners, high achievers, record breakers, a status symbol for many, one of the world's most loved luxury brands, worn by celebrities like Winston Churchill to James Bond. The most expensive Rolex sold for $17 million at an auction. You know you finally made it financially to be able to afford one. Why are these watches so expensive? And how does the company avoid paying any tax? This is the story of an orphan boy who pioneered modern wristwatches and created a billion-dollar empire. Hans Wilsdorf, the second son of Hannah and Johann Daniel Wilsdorf, was born on March 22, 1881 in Kulmbach, Germany. His family ran a successful business selling iron goods. Unfortunately, at the age of 11, his mother passed away of illness, and tragically enough, the following year his father would pass away too, leaving Hans an orphan at the age of 12. His uncle sold off Hans's family business and used that money to put Hans and his siblings in a prestigious boarding school in Berlin. Hans hated this, since he was teased and bullied by the other boys as he was an outsider. He put all his focus on school to get through this hard time. Hans excelled in math and language, which played an important role later in his life. At school, he became friends with a Swiss boy who would tell him stories of his hometown, Wilsdorf, which is known for its watchmaking industry. Hans was intrigued. After graduating, he moved to Geneva, Switzerland, and started working at a pearl exporting company and was making good money. One day, Hans received a job offer from his friend at Kuno Cotton, which was one of the biggest premium watchmaking companies at that time. And this company was based in Wilsdorf, where he always wanted to go to. But he was making enough money at his current job. Yet, he decided to take up his friend's job offer. He was hired as an English correspondent and clerk, since he was good at languages in his school. This job gave Hans an opportunity to learn watch construction and understand the watchmaking industry. Most of his job involved tasks like winding hundreds of pocket watches every day. He developed an appreciation for the fine craft. After 2 years in the company, he had to go back to Germany and serve in the army. Then, at the age of 22, he moved to London and worked at another watchmaking company, but this time as a sales representative. And he worked with a new client and grew their sales. This job gave him an understanding of marketing and sales required for the watchmaking industry. Hans was dreaming big, and all the skills that he learned working, he wanted to implement them. At this time, he met his future wife, Florence Frances May Crotty, and he got married. One day, Hans was talking to his brother-in-law, Alfred James Davis, about his dream to start a watchmaking company and how he wants to implement the skills that he learned working at the watchmaking companies. Alfred could see the passion in Hans, so he agreed to fund the business. They shook hands together and founded the Wilsdorf and Davis Limited in 1905 in England. They would import watch movements from Switzerland and place them in cases and sell them in England. They sold those timepieces at an affordable rate. Hans was bothered by one thing in the watchmaking industry: pocket watches. At that time, wristwatches were worn by women mostly as jewelry, and the movements inside them were small and not precise, so the watch would not tell time correctly. Pocket watches were big and bulky because the movements inside them were big and precisely made, and at that time it was considered impossible to make wristwatches to be accurate. Hans found pocket watches to be inconvenient because it had to be taken out of the pocket every time to tell the time, and he had busy hands while he was working. So Hans set out to make wristwatches of the highest quality. In the next few years, he traveled in many countries in Europe to learn about small details of watchmaking from master watchmakers and experts. And then eventually, he started making high-quality watches. Of course, Hans knew quality was only one aspect of business. The other important aspect was marketing and brand recognition. He wanted the watch to have a classy name, a short one that can be pronounced in any language, and one that could fit easily in a dial of a watch. He came up with Rolex. It is said that one day while he was commuting, a genie whispered into his ears the name Rolex, and that's how the name originated. Regardless, he registered the name as the trademark for Wilsdorf and Davis. In the next few years, many rich people started using Rolex watches, and it was highly appreciated. Rolex became the first watch to get a Swiss certificate of precision, and the British Q Observatory gave it a Class A rating. Come 1914, World War broke out, shutting down many watch companies, but not Rolex. The war made Hans's company more famous because the watches were accurate and reliable. The soldiers were given Rolex watches. The precise watches helped them better coordinate attacks. The company grew to a large extent. The headquarters of Rolex was situated in London. During the war, Germany became Britain's enemy, and since Hans was of German descent, tensions began rising. So Hans decided to shift the headquarters to Switzerland, where it is still standing today. In 1925, Hans registered the famous Rolex logo of the 5-star crown. Hans's marketing genius was the reason for the company's huge success. In 1926, Rolex created the world's first fully waterproof watch, the Rolex Oyster. and he marketed it with a perfect idea. He heard about an English woman named Mercedes Glides, who was going to swim the English Channel, and he convinced her to wear the watch while doing so. After over 10 hours in the freezing water, she emerged with the watch fully intact, generating headlines. Rolex rose to international fame. Rolex dealers were told to display the watches in fish tanks in their window, with real fishes swimming inside them. Just 5 years later, Rolex created the first self-winding watch, the Rolex Oyster Perpetual. Hans also made sure that popular people in the world wore a Rolex. For example, the crew that scaled Everest for the first time ever did so wearing Rolexes. In 1935, Sir Malcolm Campbell set a land speed record of 300 miles, and he was wearing a Rolex too. These were some of his genius marketing strategies to establish Rolex as a wristwatch for success and high achievement. And to answer the question, why are these watches so expensive? Each of the watches that leave the factory in Bienne is tested to a high standard. Each Rolex is accurate to -2 to +2 seconds a day, surpassing the standard of -4 to +6 seconds a day. They are tested by the independent Swiss Chronometer Testing Institute, and each watch earns the title of a superlative chronometer. The inner movements of the watch take time and money to be made with precision and quality. The small parts have a high failure rate during manufacturing, and these parts are put together by hand, and the labor costs in Switzerland is one of the highest in the world. While standard luxury brands use 316L steel, Rolex uses 904L, which is much superior. Rolex makes 800,000 to 1 million watches a year, and does everything by itself, including melting the gold and steel. Considering the quality of workmanship and the materials used, the watches are reasonably priced. The watches are highly desirable among collectors and generally appreciate in value over time. In 1945, on the 40th anniversary of the company, Rolex released another new model of watch called the Datejust, the world's first automatic watch with a date window on its dial. Sadly, shortly before announcing the watch, he lost his wife, Florence, who passed away due to an illness. His wife was with him through all the ups and downs of life, so he was devastated, widowed at the age of 63 with no children. How ironic, a revolutionary watchmaker was running out of time. He began thinking about the future of the company. So the next few years, he was trying to figure out a way to make sure that the empire he built would be in good hands for generations to come. In 1946, he established the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation and transferred 100% ownership of the company to the foundation. To this day, the foundation maintains full ownership of Rolex. And since it's a foundation and not a company, there are no corporate taxes on any of the profits made by Rolex, because essentially it's a charity, so the company will never be sold or go public. Large percentage of the profits go to charity, including education and training of watchmakers. Hans Wilsdorf died in the year 1960. Following his death, the company focused on marketing towards being an exclusive watch collection for people of high society, to become the luxury brand it is today. From being an orphan boy, Hans Wilsdorf went on to become a revolutionary watchmaker who created the most recognizable watch brand in the world. Now if you want to watch an even more interesting story, check out this video on why Elon Musk bought Twitter. I think you will enjoy it. Either way, thank you for watching the video, and I will see you in the next one.